Hey algebra students, so this is going to be the last one for today. We're going to actually practice using the quadratic formula like I was saying. It says here you are investigating homes in two major areas. The home values over the past 10 years in these areas are represented by these two equations. And then it says in each of these areas, the y value, which will be this is kind of like y equals, and then you've got this stuff. That represents the amount that average housing values have either decreased or increased in thousands of dollars since the housing crash. And T on here represents the amount of time that has passed since the housing crash. They kind of give you an example on here. This is an example. Okay, so here, if you have an equation that looks like this on a graph, okay, you can see this is our baseline, okay? These are positive values, positive housing values. This is 0, okay? So it's saying that the housing market went down below the baseline at this point right here and at this point right here. And they kind of show you the little arrows. Okay, we're trying to find those two values. These are actually x values, okay? Those are our zeros that we're looking for. So two ways we can do this. The first way we can do it is by using the quadratic formula that helps us find zeros. And the second way is by graphing it. Graphing, of course, is much easier. The only issue sometimes is that you may not get it as accurate, and using the quadratic formula ensures you're going to get it nice and accurate. So we're going to practice using the quadratic formula again and apply it to this. So what we have to do is it says solve each equation. So we'll use that using the quadratic formula. We'll solve it. And then it says use your answers. So your answers basically will determine those two zeros basically. Okay? It'll determine when, in that area, when it crossed the baseline value at the time of the crash. So that's going to be this first 0. And when it crossed it, when it was recovering after the crash. Okay? So really all we got to do, what it's telling us to do, is just solve these two equations right here using the quadratic formula. That's what it's telling us to do. So if you look at our first one, we'll just identify A, B, and C. So for the first one, A is this first value here. It equals 2. B equals negative 17. You can kind of see that there. And C, this last value, is a positive 4. Okay, so you've got A, B, and C right there. On this one, the value, if it's not written out in front, then that means there's a 1. So A equals 1. B equals negative 10, and C is equal to 1. So that's not the hardest part. Usually it's just plugging it in, but even so, it's not that bad. So now we just have to plug these values in and see what our two zeros are. Okay, and again, this quadratic formula is nice to use for these because these aren't factorable. This is not a good quadratic formula, or quadratic, sorry, to factor. So that's why we want to use the quadratic formula. So, using our values here, I'm just gonna I'm gonna write the quadratic formula again right here for you, and then we'll just solve these. So there's the quadratic formula, and using for the first area 1, okay. A was equal to 2, B was equal to negative 17, and C was equal to 4. So we're just going to plug these values in. So again, if you look at negative B, that means opposite of what B is, so that will be a positive 17 then at this point. If it was opposite of negative 17, then plus or minus the square root of negative 17 squared minus 4 times A is 2, and C is 4. all over 2 times a. Okay, so again, I can just put this in the calculator and see what that is. And that way it'll save a little bit of time here. So I want to do parentheses this time since I have a negative value for b. So I'm going to do parentheses negative 17, then I'm going to square it, minus 4 times 2 times 4, 257. Now that's not as nice of a number, but that's okay, because what we'll do is just estimate it. And remember, that's still under the square root. So on the bottom, we'll just simplify that. 2 times 2 is 4. So now I'm going to take the square root of 257. And again, it's not going to be that nice. It'll probably be like something like 16 point something. 16.03. All right, so 17 plus or minus 16.03. We'll just say roughly that. Over 4. And again, now we have to figure out what our two answers are. So 17 plus 16.03, what is that? So I'm going to add 17 to that. That's 33. So first, one of our answers is 33.03 over 4. Okay, that answer divided by 4 is 8.26. So 8 years, 8.25 years basically after the housing market crashed. That's one of the answers here. And then our other answer, we're going to do minus 17 minus 16.03, 0.97 divided by 4. So that's 0.2425. So that's saying about 1/4 of a year. So this is the first one then. This is going to be when it first crossed the baseline value, because that value is smaller. Okay? So area 1 then, I guess when it crashed, it crossed the baseline at 1/4 of a year, in like 3 months. And then after 8 years and 1/4, it went back above the baseline. So that's not too bad. It took 8 years to recover. So now we'll look at area 2. So remember, for area 2, A was equal to 1, B was equal to -10, and C was equal to 1. So now I'm going to plug these values in, and then we'll figure out what the results are. So again, opposite of B, that's that first one. So 10 plus or minus square root of -10 squared, because remember that's B, minus 4 times A is 1 times C is 1, there you go, all over 2 times A, which is 1. So again, I'm just going to put that in the calculator, this stuff that's underneath the square root, and we'll figure that out. We could probably actually figure this out pretty easily, but I'll just put it in there anyway. So clear this out. So -10 squared minus 4, pretty much 4, because 4 times 1 times 1 is just 4. So that's 96. And so I'm going to write 10 plus or minus the square root of 96 over 2 times 1 is 2. So I'm just going to put a 2 there. And now I'm going to figure out what's the square root of 96. So 9.8. Okay. And now I just have my two answers. I got to figure those out. So first I'm going to do 10 plus 9.8 is 19.8. So we're going to do 19.8. Okay, 19.8 divided by 2. That's going to be our first one. Okay. So if I divide that by 2, I get 9.9. And then I'm going to do 10 minus 9.8. That's 0.2. And then divide it by 2. So 0.1. And I'll just write this in there. This ended up being 0.2 over 2, which is 0.1. So that tells me that for this area, it crossed the baseline in 1/10 of a year, which is like a month-ish, okay? And then it didn't recover until 9 and 9/10 of later, 9/10 years later. So this took longer to recover, and on here it said the area with the most growth potential will be the area that recovered the fastest. So basically they want to know which area recovered the fastest. And remember, this had a smaller difference between the two numbers. So I'd say area 1 recovered the fastest. Okay, so just write that on your worksheet.